Today we're going to talk a little bit about preserving evidence of sex and species on a big game animal. For even leaving evidence of sex and evidence of species, you want to think about that ahead of time, that you need to leave that, and it just helps you make better cuts. And whether it's a buck or a doe, male or female, I just split the evidence of sex right in half. So in here we've got nipples, we're just going to split them in half. If it was a buck, of course, you'd have testicles there, and you leave one testicle on each quarter. And our first cut is very shallow. We just don't want to cut it too deep. And if you see right here, I am splitting where the nipples are on this doe. And what I'm going to leave on here for evidence of sex is I'm going to leave one of the nipples attached to this inner roast. If it was a buck, I would leave one of the testicles attached to the inner roast. If it's a buck, you can actually skin out the testicles, and there's a ligament that'll attach it right to that inner roast, so you don't need any hair or anything else other than the evidence of sex part. And the reason why that's a rule is so when an officer checks you in the field, if you've removed the head, they can tell if it's a male or a female. That is required by the tag in which you have. And I'm just going to free this up. And so I'm preserving just that one little nipple there. That's really all I need attached to this inner roast. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue gutting down here, but I've got that attached already so I don't forget later on when maybe it's getting dark or the weather changed and I'm getting in a rush. So I leave that attached. All right, now we're specifically going to address how to keep the tail attached. And again, why do we need to do that? It's so if an officer checks you in the field and you removed a hind quarter from the head because you left the head behind, or in a CWD hunt, chronic wasting disease, we're required to leave the head and spine behind, or the brain matter and spine behind. We're just running with quarters. We need to be able to show an officer that, yes, this is in fact a white-tailed deer, this is not a mule deer, it's not an elk, it's not a moose. So you have to have evidence of sex and evidence of species. So I'm going to start by splitting the tail, and we're just going to run right down the top of the tail. It actually splits pretty easy. Free up that tailbone. And you don't need to have the whole tail on there, just a good chunk of it. And in the past, we've left the tail on there, and we've left the tailbone in. But these days, the tailbone is part of the spine. It's got that spinal fluid in it that can carry CWD, so we want to leave that in the field where the deer was shot. And I got to do a little creative cutting here and not cut the tail off. Cut the tail skin off, I should say, because we're going to cut the tail off and we're going to leave that in the field. And I'm just going to leave a little chunk here, and I'm going to keep it attached to the hind quarter. So it's a little goofy as we get through this. Okay, so I've got this tail attached to the hind quarter. I'm just going to kind of free it up to cutting it down into where the joint may be. Okay, so that's a white-tail tail attached to that hind quarter. If you all recall, we've got our evidence of sex. This is, a doe, so we have a nipple attached here. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to skin this out and say leave that tail attached to that. Okay. Woohoo! All right, we got the tail attached there. So this is kind of what your end product on one hind quarter should look like. This will meet your evidence of sex, evidence of species requirements. So again, I'd put this in a game bag. We'd wrap it up, put it in the pack, put it in the back of the horses, put it over our shoulder, however we're going to carry that out. And there's your legal requirements for evidence of sex, evidence of species.